This week's episode of the Irish Dance Podcast is being sponsored by Irish Dance Theatre, who are currently auditioning for spots in their Christmas production, The Celtic Gift, playing in multiple venues in Colorado this December. For more information, please visit irishdancetheatre.com. If you would like to support Irish Dance Theatre, there are a number of ways you can do so. Please go to irishdancetheatre.com/support. My name is Martin Percival, and you are listening to the Irish Dance Podcast, folk dance to phenomenon and beyond. Hi everyone, I'd like to introduce today's guest. She's an Irish dancer and adjudicator, also a licensed mental health counsellor and arts therapist. Please welcome my good friend, Maggie Ritnour. Hi Maggie.
Hi, Martin. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. It's really good to talk to you. You have an amazing job that you're doing, and I'd love to get to start talking about that in a minute, but we want to get the Irish dance stuff out of the way first.
Okay, yeah.
How did you get involved in Irish dance?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. So my sister is an incredible, so I have a sister who's significantly older than I am. So when I was in kindergarten, she was graduating from high school, and she's a really amazing ballerina. And she, if you know about the ballet world, it's really like body specific. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she had some real challenges. Like, she developed an eating disorder, but it was before the time that eating disorders were really like known about and treated in the way that we know now. And they're still not known as much as they could be. But, ballet kind of, the ballet world is really focused on bodies and finding that very lean line. And it asks for their dancers to alter their bodies to aid in the performance. And so the story goes that she was like, dancing in New York, like with Alvin Ailey, and being asked to alter her body in very specific ways. And so she was like, let's spare my younger sister. And my mom found this. I was taking ballet as a kid.
Right. But
most of the weekends were spent going to auditions with her in the city. And so my mom found folk dancing, and my mom's of Irish descent. And so the story goes that my sister said, put Maggie into something else that's not this world.
Yeah, because it must have been quite painful, right?
I think it was painful. It's also like a huge part of her life. And she is in a lot of ways my idol. I really wanted to be a dancer and wanted to be like her. And I feel really grateful that I was spared the amount of pain that I think could have come with that world.
Yeah, wow.
So, in Irish dance, I love Irish dance because it really celebrates a lot of different bodies that you see. You go to a competition and you see like many different shapes and sizes, and you can find someone that you can say, oh, I look like that person, and I can kind of dance like that person. There's so many different bodies to look at.
Yeah. No, that's really important. Yeah. I think that's great. So who did you dance with in New York then?
I started as a kid with Pat Butler in Syracuse, New York. And so I was like maybe 6 or 7. And then I ended up transferring. There was a load of people who transferred, and I transferred over to Kathleen O'Keefe, who I danced with through college, essentially. And I ended up, because I was in college and I was doing performances on the weekend with Sharon Lynn Resendiz in Las Vegas, and I did a couple tours with Common Ground when it first started, and like small like dance shows and companies like abroad, and nationally, and I ended up meeting some people on the West Coast, specifically Irish musicians that I toured with in Japan, and ended up there and settled in Seattle, signing a 3-month lease with a dear friend, and ended up there for 11 years. And because I was still dancing but wanted a place to dance, I ended up going to Tony Comerford for just a place to practice and be around other dancers. And I was essentially retired and I came back into team dancing because Pat Butler, I mean, you probably knew back in the day, he was known for his team dancing. So they needed someone, and I came in and I just kind of like restarted after
reignited
college.
The passion. That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, kudos to you and to Tony. I'm sure that was I can remember when you were dancing with Tony. I don't remember the New York leg of your journey, but so 11 years then in Seattle. How was that?
Well, I mean, it was tumultuous, and I feel, as Irish dance does when you're far from home, it creates a home and a family for you. And I feel so grateful for my dancing career up until then that allowed me to connect in that way. Because I think that Seattle became my home most definitely because of my connection with Irish dance. I mean,
that's amazing. Yeah.
Irish dance, like my Irish musician friends are like my family out there, and the Comerford School was like, they welcomed me, and Tony and Kelly Nagan is like one of my dearest friends. I don't know what I would have done without them. So and out of that like came, I got to take my teacher's examination. I don't think I would have been able to do that in the same way. And I never wanted to take my AD. I always wanted to be a teacher. But here I am.
Yeah. It kind of, the whole journey, it's once you're involved, you're on the wheel, right? You're on the,
on the wheel.
I was having a conversation with a friend recently about that. I'm just saying, wherever you land in the world, there is Irish dance everywhere. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful way of having a connection really quickly. It's a great community, definitely. Definitely.
It's a great community, and it's like family. Sometimes it's cutthroat and mean, and sometimes it's hurtful, and sometimes it's just like full of love. And I think that what I've seen, especially growing up in it, that the underlining everything, that there is so much love. And I feel like Irish dancing is like a microcosm for life. Like you can learn so many lessons in Irish dance lessons for life by the performance and the practice and the dedication, or the grief and the failures like that you can practice in Irish dance.
Yeah. It is. That's really interesting. The whole the competition scene can get a bad rap, but you're right. There is an underlying. I mean, otherwise, why would we be doing it? We all love it.
Absolutely.
I mean, just short of an obsession, right?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's pretty obsessive, and the bug has bit me a long time ago, so I'm definitely obsessed, and I feel like tremendously like grateful. It's been, I think it was, I know it was my first love in life, and it has been there throughout, and it's not that I was a world champion or even a national champion, but I learned to practice and to get along with others and to support other people, even if they had a better day, or to support other people if they didn't have as good of a day. I mean, it's really like, it's such a beautiful metaphor for life. Yeah. That's why I really love it.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And it's lovely to hear that, some positivity around the whole thing, because, we can go off on a negative tangent with what's happening and the competition scene and everything. And I mean, this is an open forum, so we can talk about whatever. But it is important, I think, for us to all. I know I've been in the world of Irish dance for 40 years, and I just can't see not being in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, how was competition for you then? How did you enjoy competition?
I did. I mean, I'm pretty competitive.
Yay.
So it allowed me to have, I mean, I don't think I'm a mean person, but it's like this aggressive aspect of a personality that can be brought out. I love that it's two at a time. I love that you're dancing on the same stage with somebody else, not to bump into them or anything, but it's like a puzzle or like Tetris or something. And you have to perform, and it's kind of like life. Even on bad days, you still have to show up and do this performance, whether it's for a job interview or for stepping out into the world and looking confident in what you're doing as from a waitress to a doctor, right?
Right.
We're all going to have days that it's people don't believe us unless we're actually pretending that we're confident, even if we're not.
Yeah.
And I love that it was a chance to get good at something, to have a technical solution.
Yeah.
You were always striving for this idea of perfection, and it would get harder as you went. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love competition.
No, absolutely. And that carries into judging, right? I know that when I'm judging, I'm looking for the perfect dancer to walk on the stage,
Yeah.
So when somebody does, we're always looking at the negative aspects. They're not doing this right. They're not doing this right. We're taking points off, kind of, because you have this idea of a perfect dancer in your head, right? Is that how you feel?
Oh, I don't have. That's a really good question. I'll need to think. I guess I have an aesthetic. I think that we all do, that I really like, and I can see sometimes, even beyond that aesthetic, that there are almost perfection in Irish dancers. I mean, I got to judge the Nationals, the North Americans 2 years ago, in 2017. And it was oh my gosh, the caliber was incredible. And I think that I'm not always looking for perfection. I think that I'm looking for, especially in smaller competitions, effort and potential, and that shines through. You can really see the kids who've worked, because I was a teacher and I was a dancer. I know what it's like to really have floppy bits of choreography. And then there's parts that are really structured. You can tell that someone has worked on this part. And I love seeing that too. I think that is maybe not perfection, but that's the effort. That's interesting. I know that when I'm watching watching dance, it's just sometimes, and I've said this to kids when I was teaching as well. It's just you need to make. I mean, if you put 100% effort into it, you will get noticed by the judge. Yes. We're looking to we're rooting for the dancers, basically. Yes, I'm totally rooting. I just want to cheerlead for them all, and I know, especially the ones that struggle, right? It's come on, just get through this. Yeah, I know, and I mean, I remember what that was like for friends or for myself, and it's incredible to see some of them, dancers who I don't know, but I recognize, really pushing through that struggle. Yeah. I think that's, I'm tickled to have that perspective now, not teaching, and being able to see kids year after year, fesh after fesh, improve. Yeah. And well, to that point then, let's talk about this, because I've had conversations with some people who think that if you're not involved, you're not actively teaching, you shouldn't be judging, because you're not quite with it, perhaps, Yeah. And of course I disagree wholeheartedly, because I'm not actively teaching, yet I'm still very much involved in judging. Yeah. But I know when I was teaching, you kind of have
like you have kids that are in a certain competition, and then you kind of, that's the benchmark, so to speak, that you're going against. But when you don't have kids, when you don't have any students, it's just, you're just judging the competition that's there and on what's in front of you in the day,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's an argument to both sides. I can totally see that, especially as the choreography becomes, I mean, Irish dance has changed so much since we were young. And prior to that, I mean, looking at videos of Irish dancing back in like Shano style.
Yeah.
And even as I grow in being a judge, like I can see new movements that are like so intricate that I don't know what that's like to teach every movement.
Right.
And so I think that that's a valid argument. And I also think that there's a perspective, like I can step away and not be blinded by what I imagine this to look like, or my specific like take on that movement,
right? Or
being a part of the competitive world of like I know these teachers, or I don't know these teachers. Right. Right. Like, I mean, and that's, it's not completely true. And it's also like, when you're out of it, it's a different perspective. I feel definitely more objective looking at the dancing. And I totally understand that argument also. I would prefer to continue to judge because I love it. And I think that I do try to be fair. And I would want that for my dancers when I teach, if I teach again. When I was teaching, I wanted that. And so I feel like, in that respect, it would be a bummer to lose out on judges like me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I understand both sides, of course.
No, I do too as well. My argument is that for some people, when judging, we could be judging every week in North America, so you do get to still see a lot of Irish dancing.
Yeah.
So, you're kind of with it,
of course.
Yeah. So, but it is, I think there's room for both on a panel, definitely, which is why we have panels, I suppose, so you get different perspectives and different opinions.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that that's a tremendous thing that they don't allow someone to become a judge until you have taught with your TCRG for a number of years, and then you have to be above a certain age, which really like gives perspective on life. I mean, life really changes in ways that I didn't realize, and to have that installation of time as like built-in perspective to be a judge, I think was just as important. So knowing that I've been dancing since I was like Irish dancing since I was like 6 or 7, and that I taught, and danced in a lot of different venues, like performances and, championships and at the Worlds, and that I know all of those things also. And I have the perspective of seeing the dancers each weekend. Like I think that's a built-in like structure.
No, it is good. So I mean, sometimes it seems a bit arbitrary, but that makes sense from a kind of life perspective as well. Yeah. No, that's good. So I mean, you're obviously enjoying adjudicating.
Well, I just, we've talked, like, we're obsessed. Like, I'm obsessed with
we are.
Dance. I really love it. I love the music. Oh my gosh, the music. And I love the dancing. Yeah, I feel very lucky to still be able to be involved as much, because my job takes up the same time of the day that I would be teaching. Like, if I could do both, I would, and I definitely tried. And many people do. I have awe and just admiration, and maybe sometime in my life I can do it, but not
right now.
It just doesn't fit in. Yeah.
But that's
So I'm grateful
you're not going anywhere. Yeah. So just briefly then, let's talk a little bit about competition is there anything, let's talk about the negatives and the positives of competition from your perspective. Like, I'm just thinking about, if we think about where Irish dance is going, and the competitions are getting fiercer and more competitive and harder, and we're squeezing out really elite dancers and everything. I just, like, as a system, do you think it's working?
I do, and I don't. Thanks for helping me understand even more clearly. Yeah, I think that I love Irish dancing, and things that I love about Irish dancing are, like, not just the dancing and the music and the technique and the stamina required and the dedication, but I also really love all the scene, the dresses. I love the hair, and I think that those things, the pure aesthetic of Irish dance can sometimes be not too much, but too much. And even though I love, like, looking at new dresses, and I'm an artist, like, so I went to art school. I love, like, colors and designs. And I also think that I don't look at those when I'm judging. So it's almost like, a bummer that there's so much stress put on those. And I remember as a dancer, my mom making my dresses, and definitely, like, looking back, and I love my mom. My mom is an incredible woman. She's my role model in so many ways. And, like, those dresses aren't the same as the dresses that were coming out. And now the dresses that we see are just, like, so incredible. And it's not about the dresses, right? So it becomes like a financial burden for some people, and that really bums me out, because to be taken seriously as an Irish dancer, there's a lot of push for the look. And I think that it's really not about the look. It's never been about the look. If a dancer is incredible, they could be wearing a paper bag, and I would give them
absolutely
first. Absolutely. And I would wonder, where's the love to help this person get a costume? But if you don't have money, like, you can't take the lessons. There's not always, like, ability for privates, if there are privates. And like any extracurricular activity, at least in the States, like, it comes down to a financial component. And that's the only thing that, when that gets in the way, that makes me only bummed, because it then gives the like, guys, that's what Irish dancing is, and the kids who focus on that, or the parents who focus on that, because I've never met a teacher who solely focuses on that.
Oh no, of course.
Even though they understand, like, I understand that you will be seen as more competent if you dress in your Sunday best, right? Like, but that doesn't mean that once you start dancing that's not possible. So it's when the kids and when the parents focus on that, and then they spend all the time and effort and money to just get ready, it's not what it's about. And so that's where I know it is what it's about too. Like, I want someone who comes up and looks ready to take
looks
part. And like, I remember back in the day, like, people putting dance dresses on the top of their cars, and, like, someone lost their dance dress. So it's like borrowing a dance costume, and that's why I love that there are, like, these blackout competitions, and that especially in the summer, because also the summers just seem more brutal out here on the East Coast, like, to be able to allow dancers to wear a skirt and, a top that's black or that's very simple, because it's too much with the dresses out in the heat.
Yeah, in the heat. No, I would agree with that.
Those would be and they're not completely negative, because I do think that dresses are a part of it, and I love the dresses. But does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense, because, I'm one where, of course, I watch the dancing as well. But when you do have the blackout competitions and everybody's all in black, it gets really boring really quickly.
And it's easier to see people based on their colors too.
Yeah, and just to remember dancers and just to have a frame of reference for them, and it doesn't, like, of course the dancing is amazing and wonderful, but it's just high, kind of highlighted with the dresses. Absolutely. And everything as well.
Yes, I agree.
So, obviously we can judge both, and I just wouldn't want to have to do a major with everybody all in black.
No.
I think,
absolutely.
my head would start swimming, but it's, but I don't know. It's interesting because there are more and more competitions with just leotards and skirts, and sometimes I personally feel that they need more structure of a dress when they're dancing. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a good point. It's harder to remember who's who without some sort of color or design difference.
Yeah, I mean, of course you've got the number, so you know who they are, but it's just like you can just quickly reference back to that beautiful dancer in the pink that I loved at the beginning of the competition,
right.
And that kind
instead
of thing.
Number 23. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it gets difficult. Yeah. So that, I mean, it's not entirely negative what you're saying, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
So what do you think is I think we've touched on it briefly, but the positive aspects of even the community as a whole, Actually, I'll ask you that question. Do you think we are getting away from the community aspect of Irish dance with the intense focus on the competition?
No, I don't. I think that part of being in a community is being in support and in allegiance with a team, and with finding that in a playful or competitive way is it teaches so many lessons that I love the aspect that there is competitions. I think that that helps. I do think that there's always situations, and there probably have always been, that the competitions can be taken to a level that it's not just about the competitions, and
it becomes unhealthy.
Right, and I think that that's a lesson that can be fostered within the community of Irish dance, and I think that we all try to do that with the having it be day-long events, or on the West Coast I know that they're 2-day feshes, and it's not just about the competition, but it's also a way to give families the time to hang out, and so in that way, no, I don't think that the competitions are getting in the way, but I think, of course, we get in the way of ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I do think that predominantly there's people in the community of Irish dance and teachers who are really fostering a sense of connection and community at all times. And going to a competition and repeatedly not doing as well as you wanted to time after time is really hard. And it's also part of life. We are not going to always be great at the things that we want to be. And that's why life has more than just Irish dance. And it's Irish dance. If that's all that you're focusing on, then it can become really draining and upsetting. But if you're focusing on the community and going to a fesh and you don't do as well as you do, but your friend does brilliantly, and you're cheering for your friend and you're happy for your friend, then that's just as incredible. No, you felt your best, you tried your best, you're disappointed, and you can be super stoked for your friend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also within the world of Irish dance, I mean, it's not just competition. There are other tracks that you can take if competition isn't your, if it's not quite what you had in mind. But
I love that about the grades now too.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely opening up that. And I just think that perhaps as a community, we should have more dialogue around different tracks for Irish dancers. I know it's incredibly difficult for a competitive teacher, because they have to be 100% focused on the competition scene, because it's never ending. Like, it keeps going all year round. So it's incredibly difficult. And, we expect our dancers to go to every competition they can to get as much stage experience as possible. But I'm just wondering if, there's some room for, some rest and different aspects of. But I mean, of course, that's up to different teachers. But if we have a conversation around it and know that there are other options, rather than just competition all the time. But I get it. I totally get it, because competitions are expensive to put on, and so you need the support of the teachers and the schools. And it is it's a never-ending cycle, right?
Yeah, there used to be rest periods. That's true.
Yeah.
It's become more of a year-round sport.
Yeah. Still, I mean, we don't.
Do you think that fosters the community, though, even more? That's like purely focused on.
I don't know. I think you're right. There are certain competitions that really foster a community aspect, and we, as teachers and organisers of Feshna, we should be aware of that, and perhaps I know it sometimes can be a bit of a kind of a add-on to have some cultural competitions and this, that and the other. But I really think that the more we can focus on it being a day out for people, or a weekend away for people. I know when I ran my fest, that's what I tried to do, was to have it, over a weekend, so that people could come and they could stay at the hotel, and they're away from home, and they could, they're with their friends, and they can make a weekend of it. But, some people just want to go in, do their dances and leave, and I guess it takes all sorts, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's a great world, and we love it.
Sorry for the fire.
Oh no, you're in New York City, right? That's
I'm in
what
Brooklyn.
We expect.
Yeah.
So talking of that, then, when did you move back to New York?
I moved back 5 years ago, so 2013, and it was big across the country.
Yeah, no, it was. I'm sure that the West Coast people were very sad to see you go. But so let's talk a little bit about your schooling. You went to school you went to the School of Visual Arts, right, in New York?
Oh yeah, I did. I graduated. Well, it started at a State University of New York school up in upstate, Alfred University, and then I transferred to the School of Visual Arts because they had an art therapy program for a certification program in undergrad, and I was really interested. Plus, I was captivated with the city, and then I actually graduated in 2001, and the year that my undergrad, the year that the towers fell, and I was abroad dancing, supposed to come back on the 11th, and it was I'm glad that I wasn't in the city actually on that day. I came back like 5 days later, unexpectedly, like delayed, and I have friends in Japan who took care of me and my friend that I was with, but it was a hard time to come back and be young and trying to start a career in New York during this really sad grieving time.
Yeah.
So I had mini dance tours that had fallen through because visas were just non-existent, and I essentially decided okay, well, I'm going to go move out to Seattle with my friend, and I ended up moving there with, like I said before, because I knew some Irish dance musicians, and I decided to stay there. Like I said, we signed a 3-month lease. I stayed for 11 years. My friend stayed for a year, and I decided while I was there, I always knew that I wanted to go back to my master's for grad school to become more focused on art therapy. But in undergrad, I was like leaving over the weekend or taking spring breaks to go do like small like bits of dance tours, or like flying to, do a performance over the weekend and flying back on Monday to like go straight to class. And it was, I'm surprised I graduated in 4 years, and it was also like way too intense. So I knew dancing had a shelf life, and I wanted to continue dancing for as long as I could. And for that reason, I didn't go back to school for my master's right away, even though I knew like I wanted to be an art therapist, which made sense to me. So a couple years into Seattle, I found a school, and I decided to go back. So I got my master's in psychology at Antioch University in Seattle. And I worked out there. It was a 3-year program. I graduated in 2009, and I was there for, 4 years, working as an art therapist and teaching Irish dance, and then got my adjudicators. And I hadn't expected to get my adjudicators. So I'm like I said, I'm very grateful to have taken the test. Thank you, Tony Comerford, for encouraging me. And that's kind of how I ended up. I wanted to be closer to my family is all here. I had no like biological family on the West Coast. But I feel I wanted to be closer to my family as they're aging, and my oldest and dearest friend lives up the street from me, essentially in Brooklyn. And I just felt like New York was my home. So it didn't quite work out the way that I wanted to with teaching, because I really wanted to keep teaching. And now I see clients for my art therapy practice in the afternoons when I would be teaching as normally. Yeah. So that's where life is now. Yeah. So I got my master's in Seattle.
So, can you explain, pardon my ignorance, but explain the whole world of art therapy.
What is art therapy? That's a great...
What is? Yes, exactly.
What are you talking about? That's a great question. Probably like my elevator pitch would be something like I get to make art with people and help them feel better. That would be like my quick,
Right, yeah.
And
that sounds great.
Thanks.
Go on, carry on.
And, I think that you probably understand as a dancer, as a creative person, that there's not always words that make sense for how you're feeling, that you can express it in a dance sometimes. Like some of my best dancing days were days that I felt something, like either anger and I was able to like pound the hell out of the floor, or like really like feeling confident. And on days that I feel something, I could produce something differently with my body. And artists tap into that, right? Like, so people who are artists like make art, and they might feel like a transformation after they're complete with art. And I essentially bring that to people. I give them the opportunity to make something that they don't necessarily have the words for. And what I've found out in this whole process and training in psychology and art is that, in fact, like where trauma is stored in our brains is in this old kind of like reptilian brain. So when babies are first born, their, brain is formed off the top of their spine, and then they have that soft spot on the top of their head, right? That is room for their brains to grow and develop more words and vocabulary, that frontal part of the brain. But all of this like imagery and sounds and senses, like all of those things are how trauma is stored. And those are actually stored way back in the bottom of your brain, closest to your spine. So those don't always have words to make sense. Like when people experience a trauma, they're not necessarily going to say, this is how I'm feeling. They might have a bizarre reaction that nobody around them makes sense for them, but there's been a smell that they've smelt that's associated with that, or a sound that they've heard, right? Like, and so that can be accessed. Like, there's been all of this new research that can be accessed through images, through moving your body, and actually doing those things might be a more effective way to, or it's been proven to be more effective to process things that don't make as much sense, and trauma does that. And there's many different forms of trauma. We all experience the trauma of being born, so there's always there's different variations. But even people who are high functioning, like you and I, can find something new or possibly like alarming by making art and having a chance to like sit with it or find our own symbols in it, or learn confidence in a new skill. Does that help?
Yes. No, I find it absolutely fascinating, and it's absolutely beautiful. It really is beautiful. I know on my own journey that, I have a tendency to isolate, and, when I was drinking, and then, I got into recovery, and just being in recovery has helped me to kind of open my mind to a lot more other ways of dealing with things. And just on my journey of self-discovery and self-growth, just being able to process trauma, because, like you said, everybody has it. So just being able to process it in very, very different ways than I was brought up knowing how to deal with, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Especially. Oh, this is turning into a counseling session. Sorry.
No, it totally. I can nerd out on this, so please keep going.
But I come from my dad's English and my mum's Irish, so my mum's very emotional and fiery and all of that, and poetic and creative and artistic. My dad is English and it's very stiff upper lip, contain your emotions and that kind of thing. But he's a beautiful artist, So we all express ourselves differently, and I just think, for me, the biggest thing is just being open to it all. But I love what you're doing. I think it's absolutely amazing. And so, do you have your own business, right?
I do. I have a private practice in Brooklyn where I see clients, and I also work part-time at a treatment center for people with eating disorders in Chelsea, in the city.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's intense.
Well, I think that this is kind of in line with what we were just talking about, how there's different, or maybe how I was imagining you talking about, there's different ways of expression, right? Mm. There's poems, and there's being expressive with your words and being expressive with art. And I think of dancing as being an expression. And I wonder of the trauma that our Irish, ancestors felt, and how that's being expressed, and how that more aggressive forms of Irish dancing and more athletic, how maybe that's an expression of where we are in the world. I mean, I could really go down the rabbit hole of thinking about this, but working with people with eating disorders is not just about the food. It's people who come in with a diagnosis of an eating disorder, the diagnosis is just a label for what we see in regards to their patterns of behavior around food, but they're oftentimes seen in other places as well. So it's not just about the food, and it's all about the food. So people who really struggle with restriction, like isolation, or restricting themselves from their friends, or restricting themselves from what they feel like they're worth, whether it's calories and nourishment, adequate nourishment to make their bodies and their brains function, or if it's restriction from allowing themselves to, watch a television show that they're interested in, or have fun in specific ways, or doing things that they would normally, or they had previously found really fun. It's similarly binging, people who struggle with Well, a lot of times people who do struggle with binging are oftentimes restricting at one part of the day, like, and then they eventually
that's the release.
Right. Then their body says like, wait, I'm really hungry. And so they want to maybe comfort themselves, or it's like their body is like so hungry that they are actually like needing to intake more food. But that is also evidenced in other things. I mean, we talk about binge watching Netflix. We talk about like, I went really hard. I did all of this cleaning like in my home, or like we all like have these ebbs and flows in our relationship with patterns of behavior in life, and that can come out in food. So I like to think of it in a really creative way, that you can see it in artwork sometimes when people take up very little space or are afraid to take up space on a page, and think about that like sometimes even with our dancers who might be hesitant to come to the front, like how that can be. Like it can be, right. You can take it so many different ways of viewing it, but yeah, it usually speaks to more than just eating and feeding habits, and it makes it really complicated, and it also makes it really close to home with metaphor use and thinking of how we cope with life stresses, how we all cope in so many different ways, and how to normalize that. To people, it feels like a gift, because I've been able to get that validation in my life. Like I use art to help regulate my emotions. I have danced in my, like dancing life to help me sort out how I'm feeling, or really release how I'm feeling. And I feel really like honored to help people find different ways to access that, who are using just one form of it. Oftentimes, like people get stuck in one coping skill or style,
right.
Like drinking, or, using like only calling that one friend, or, like they all work to some extent, and then they don't work anymore.
Until they don't. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Anything can be maladaptive at some point.
Yes, absolutely. But I think it's absolutely beautiful that you're there to facilitate all of that. It's clearly a gift that you have, and the world is a better place because of you and the work that you do.
It's really sweet, Martin.
No, I'm serious. So with your private practice clients, then, I mean, you must just share with us some successes, if you will.
Actually, I'll talk about page use last night. So I was with a client who struggles with restriction historically, and in food intake and in life. And we've been working on taking risks in different ways. I mean, being vulnerable, like with one another, like we kind of have on this phone call. I feel like I'm talking a lot, and that makes me like a little anxious, and I also like really appreciate like having a space to talk about it. And that's a vulnerability, right? Like working on this with this client to a greater extent, because being vulnerable with someone does in fact connect us, but it's so risky. And knowing that is very similar to like being open to having enough food, like, because it feels so risky, because how it might change what you want in your life, or in what your body might look like, or how you perceive your body. And so we've been exploring this with like different art materials. So when she first started coming to me, I presented like, I really love like different materials. So it was more of like markers and wax pastels. So not crayons, but like I call them my adult crayons. They're just really vivid colors.
Yeah. Right.
And then we kind of moved into like a little bit of collage, but it just didn't feel like enough of there was so much risk, and there was so much vulnerability that there was like a pulling back. So there was like this push and pull. And last night I presented her with really big paper, like 24 by 36, and chalk pastels. So chalk pastels are like adult sidewalk chalk. So they're pretty messy, and they can also cover a lot of space really quickly. I don't know if you've ever used them. They're very fun, but they can also get chalk dust everywhere. And I wasn't sure how she'd react, and the idea was to just fill in the paper with how she was feeling, and she did. And then as we talked, she continued to fill it in, and it was the first time that she'd used chalk pastels, and she was talking about being scared in so many other ways. So this became kind of a metaphor, and we talked about that this was her first time doing this, and it was also scary at first, but as she had more time with the materials, and as she had time to not just think about making art when we were the heat was off of her, by talking, she was able to do more exploration and get more curious and take up so much space. And really at the end, she was wow, expressed feeling pride, which is, so it's not something that a lot of my clients or people do. They get, people don't feel proud of small accomplishments, and it's really important, right? Because we're not always going to get the medal, and we're not always going to get a high five from our coworkers, or get the highest award that we want, or even get an award when we get ninth at a fesh or something. It's so right, it's right. That felt like a really tremendous success. I don't know. Do you follow me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It must be hearing you talk about it, it must be so rewarding. I'm sure it's very, very challenging and hard work, but it must be really rewarding when your clients have a breakthrough, or that you just see some, just some growth and some development. It's amazing to me. I can't admire you more for what you do.
I cry with that all the time.
Of course you do.
I feel really lucky. I love what I do, and some days it's really, really hard, and it makes it very challenging, and some days I just feel I guess blessed or really grateful.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me, and it's interesting because it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. They don't like art when they first come. They tell me that they're bad at it. And then they opens up a door for them that feels so beautiful to know that there's we can all be artists in just different ways.
Right. Right.
I feel
a safe space and no judgment. Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of people who, would hold back because then they feel like they're not going to be good at something, but that's not the point. Absolutely. The point is just to get it out.
Yes. Yes. So many people hold back. So many people wait until they're perfect to get it, to present it to the world. And that's
right.
What we need less of. We need more imperfection. We need more risk taking, and we need to I feel bringing it back to Irish dance, that's where our kids do the work when they show up, and they, as beginners, they do hornpipe. They do their hornpipe. So many kids just are so afraid of the hornpipe. And and you see them, you're there were 12 in the real, there were 12 in the light jig, and there were definitely 8 in the treble jig, and now there's 2 in the
4.
hornpipe.
Yeah, exactly.
To just take the risk of being imperfect. It's
as humans how we grow, right?
It's how we grow, and until we do that with our bodies somehow, I think it really limits us. When we talk about it, I think that some of the 12 steps of AA are you can be aware, that's great. Talking about it is great. And then actually doing it is really hard. Yeah. And going through the motions of apologizing, changing, it changes what happens in your body. Being able to take up space physically on a sheet of paper might seem complete nonsense, but it changes the way that we think in our body. Practicing the hornpipe isn't the same as going up and doing it and making mistakes, but just being proud of yourself for doing it.
Right.
That changes something with your your neurological synapses. When they fire, you're oh, this is possible now. And
Yeah,
possible,
which is
unless you try. Yeah.
Right. And so opens up the entire world. I think that's absolutely beautiful. So, I would just say then, to people, because we're bombarded with perfection at the moment, because everything's photoshopped to death and, everything's perfect. And there are amazing people out there, but you only become amazing by going on the journey, So, it is so really beautiful. Important to try. Yeah.
You only become amazing by going on the journey. That's so profound. Yes.
Yeah.
You got to get on the road.
Yes, get on the road. Absolutely. Well, I think it's absolutely beautiful what you're doing, Maggie. How do people, how do we find out about you? And I can put your website in the show notes, but if you want to mention it.
Yeah, so I am, my private practice is Roots Art Therapy, like roots on a tree, art therapy. So it's rootsarttherapy.nyc, or you can email me, rootsarttherapy@gmail.com. Yeah.
Perfect. So we've got one final section, which is the rapid fire questions. We can't forget these. Yeah, okay. You can be as quick as you can, whatever. Okay, so this is Maggie in a nutshell. So what's your favorite food?
Ooh, tacos?
Riverdance or Lord of the Dance?
Riverdance.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Do it with love.
Excellent. Is there a book that's changed your life?
Oh, many. There's a children's book called Flutterby. It's like my favorite book, probably. There's a butterfly that says to this little winged Pegasus, like, you are you just as I am me. Nothing more, nothing less. And so that's probably been most significant throughout my life.
Oh, that's beautiful. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Oh, yeah. I'll eat pineapple forever.
It's tripping people up. It's creating quite the debate outside of the podcast. Can you? So
I really like that
question. So, if you could share with us some success you had as a dancer or teacher, and then, and then some challenges that you've had, also.
Oh, I think success. Probably just this in a nutshell. One of my greatest successes was 8th at the Nationals, and my greatest challenges was that I missed the awards.
Oh. Oops.
I was so sad.
Why did you miss it? What did you do?
My mom wanted to take a nap, and
God.
Yeah, and we didn't have we couldn't afford a room in the hotel, and so we were way away, and we just didn't realize but it also I feel like it's formed. I was very angry and very sad and everything in between, and very happy. So it was like all of these things.
Yeah. Oh, God love you. Yeah.
Yeah. But as a teacher, do you want that too, or should I just?
Yes. Yeah. What as a teacher?
Oh, as a teacher, I think, gosh, it's so funny. Like I had this little 8-hand when I taught with Tony Comerford, and they were like under 10, and they were just, like under 10, 8 hands are like, there was a 6-year-old, and I didn't get to go. I was presenting at an art therapy conference, so I didn't get to go to that Oireachtas, and I was just so proud of them, like for their dedication, for their parents' dedication, and that they really had a lot of fun, and that I don't remember what they got. I don't know if they did particularly.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, does it?
But I loved that community of those kids, and that those kids, maybe there's 6 of them that are probably still in touch, and definitely this was a number of years ago. So definitely 4 of them that are still dancing. And I love that. I love.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
They were just floppy arms. No fines. Boys Away was just like who knows what's going to happen.
But that is just, we all love it. That's what's so adorable because you've got to start somewhere, right? The journey.
Yeah.
You've got to go on the journey.
Yes,
yeah.
They went on the journey. They got on the road.
Do you have a pet peeve as an adjudicator?
Oh, I think, probably I never know what anybody's thinking, but when dancers come out and they when it looks like they're not trying.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is just
well, it's wasting everybody's time, quite frankly.
Yeah. And it's like, obviously you've put yourself together, you got yourself here, and usually it's at an age where I don't think that anybody has forced them up on the stage. So it's like maybe 12 and up, and they just seem to be miserable and not trying. And that makes me really irritated.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair enough. So if anybody's getting up in front of Maggie, make sure you put all your effort in. Yeah.
Yeah. Or just look like you're loving that you're not giving.
Yeah, right. I love being lazy. Yeah. And then finally, if you could give advice to young dancers, what would it be? What would be your words of wisdom? Yeah.
Keep going. If you feel like there's a mess up, I don't know if I've seen it. And if I have, it doesn't even matter as much as your ability recovery. To keep going. Yeah. Your recovery lets me know that you've practiced and that you know what comes next and that you have the ability to pick up and keep going. And that speaks to memory, that speaks to dedication, that speaks to that you've practiced it and that your teachers practiced it with you. And that speaks to you being strong enough, because it's hard to stop or falter and get back going. I mean, it's like you lose momentum. I think there's physics in it, and just, it's okay. Mistakes happen. I'm not looking for a perfect dancer. I'm looking for someone who's worked really hard and who knows their material and knows even if there's a mess up, and you can see it sometimes. And I know from, I'm not going to keep talking. That's
from experience. We know what it's like, right? Yeah, yes. Exactly. So just get up and give it the fair crack of a whip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Maggie. I really appreciated this conversation, and I wish you all the best with your arts therapy. It just sounds absolutely amazing. And thank you for sharing
so much, Martin. This was really lovely. Thanks for your time and your brilliant questions. And I'm so excited for this podcast. This is really a fantastic idea.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the podcast. Got some good news. We are now available on Spotify as well as iTunes and other podcast apps. So please let anyone know that wants to listen to the podcast. You can find us there. Hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.